Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. I was present at the Lander performance, and it really is really good. So I'll give you a little push there. I'm your host tonight. My name is Randy Wise. I'm the curator at the Lander Pioneer Museum. Before we begin our musical history tour, I'd like to thank a couple of folks. Bob Husa, who just spoke to you. He's the Director of Arts in Action. We appreciate his support. We'd love to thank Central Wyoming College Arts Center and Alec Henderson, the stage manager. He's running around here someplace. Brad Christensen is the sound engineer tonight. And we'd like to thank them all for helping us make this possible for you folks. And thank you for coming out and supporting music. So tonight we're going to take a tour from the Renaissance all the way up to contemporary jazz. We're going to hear music from a lot of different eras, and I'm going to give you kind of the history lesson to go along with that. We begin tonight with the Renaissance. We've all heard that term. The Renaissance is when Europe is coming out of the Dark Ages and rediscovers the arts and literature from ancient Greece and ancient Rome and creates a renaissance in learning. And it was a flowering of all kinds of things, including music. One of the main inventions at this time was the Gutenberg press. And we all have heard about the Gutenberg press printing books, but it also printed music. And that was very important to disseminate music to people so they could learn it and perform it. In the Renaissance, music grew in a number of ways. Composers like John Dunstable and Joaquin de Perez, Thomas Tallis, and Palestrina wrote music that was more expressive of the text, more romantic perhaps. Renaissance music often had 4 or more independent melodic parts being performed simultaneously. The music got much more complex than it had in the past. Having these interweaving melodic lines is called polyphony. To take us to the Renaissance, the Central Wyoming Brass is going to perform 2 songs written by George Engelmann in the early 1500s. Engelmann was from Leipzig, Germany, and that's the place Bach came from 50 years later. There are going to be 2 pieces by Mr. Engelmann, Paduana Soldat and Gallard Morsky. I'll introduce the Central Wyoming Brass now. They are behind me. They were formed in 1983 at Central Wyoming College. And they consist of Carla Forbes on the French horn, and she is the only original member of the group still with them. Kelly Daynard is on trumpet, Jeremy Cochran is on trumpet, James Massman on trombone, and Tom Duncan on tuba. Without further ado, Central Wyoming Brass. Our next stop on our musical tour is the Baroque era, which comes after the Renaissance, kind of an extension of the Renaissance. The word is derived from Portuguese, and in Portugal it's pronounced barroco, and it means oddly shaped pearl. Now you would wonder why Baroque would be used as a term for music, considering it means oddly shaped pearl. Well, it ties in actually because Baroque music became much more complex and much more exaggerated, perhaps is the best way to describe it. Baroque becomes a convenient catch-all term for some of the richest and most diverse music from this period. Major world events during the Baroque era were the establishment of the Jamestown settlement in North America, the arrival of the Pilgrims in New England, the death of Galileo, and the Salem witch trials. Baroque music was largely composed by Italian composers such as Corelli, Claudio Monteverdi, Antonio Vivaldi, George Frederick Handel, and Johann Sebastian Bach. Baroque elements placed more musical emphasis on dynamics, loud and soft, instrumental music, lots of flair as musicians added notes called ornamentation, something like what jazz does later on in our history tour. Central Wyoming Brass is now going to perform a piece by Bach. It is one of the most best-known composers of the Baroque era, and his death really marked the end of the Baroque era. Some of his best-known compositions are Mass in B minor and the Brandenburg Concertos. Bach was a fine organist and a real taskmaster for his students and other musicians. He often scolded them during the rehearsals if they weren't coming up to snuff. The quintet now will perform Choral Prelude by Johann Sebastian Bach. Our next stop is the classical era. So again, all of these definitions sort of blend together in a lot of ways. Classical era also becomes a catch-all term for a lot of great music. It includes musicians ranging all the way from Johann Sebastian Bach, who we just heard, to Igor Stravinsky and the modern composer Philip Glass. The classical period, though, is a specific era in musical history, 1750 to 1820, and it spanned much of the 18th and 19th centuries. The classical era in music saw major world events, including the Industrial Revolution and the American Revolution. Vienna, Austria was the center of music during this classical period. Opera, which was invented during the Baroque but became very popular during the classical era, and there were many pieces composed for small string quartets. Orchestras of this time were small, not like orchestras of today, and they performed concerts for the middle class, where in the Baroque they were mostly for the wealthy and the upper classes or royalty. The music during the classical era was simpler, more melodic than Baroque, and with mostly single melodic lines, not so much polyphony. Notable classic musicians are Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, and the quintet is now going to perform Horn Quintet in E-flat major by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and will feature Carla Forbes. Our next stop is the Romantic era, which runs from about 1820 to roughly 1900. Compared to classical music, Romantic music favors drama, spirituality, and a connection with nature. Major American events during this musical era are the American Civil War, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the Spanish-American War, books by Mark Twain and Charlotte Bronte, the installation of the first elevator in 1857, and Wyoming being admitted as the 44th state in the Union in 1890. Notable musicians from this era are Beethoven, Franz Liszt, Richard Wagner, Schumann, and musically there were new styles like the tone poem, which explored topics such as love, longing, and a connection with nature. Opera becomes very popular during this time with long, involved composition, gigantic sets, elaborate costumes, and props. Orchestras become much larger, including more brass and woodwinds. From the Romantic era, the quintet is now going to perform Quintet Number 2, Movement 1, Allegro Risoluto by Victor Ewald. Ewald was a cellist who was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and died in Leningrad. Enjoy.